All right, welcome. Today, we're going to break down a really powerful and, frankly, a much smarter way to think about investing in this whole AI revolution. It's a strategy that's all about the infrastructure, not the hype. There's this famous saying in investing that just perfectly frames what we're talking about. Right now, it feels like everyone is out there digging for gold. They're trying to find that one AI app that's going to become the next Google.
And that is the crucial question, isn't it? We're going to answer that today. We're going to move way beyond the obvious flashy names and look at the core, the absolute non-negotiable stuff that powers this entire technological shift. I mean, let's just be real for a second. Most of these new AI apps are going to fail. They'll go to zero. So instead of trying to bet on which one wins, we're going to focus on what every single one of them, the winners and the losers, absolutely has to have just to exist in the first place. Okay, so let's get right into the nuts and bolts of this thing. The strategy is super simple. We are not betting on who wins the AI war. We're betting that the war is going to be incredibly, massively expensive, and that the arms dealers are the ones who are going to get rich.
And look, this isn't just some theory I cooked up. This whole explainer is based on a real family office portfolio, my portfolio, where I've put nearly 40,000 pounds of capital into this one single idea. That's more than half of the total equity. This is real skin in the game.
So the whole strategy really breaks down into these three distinct layers. Think of each one as a critical shovel in this AI gold rush. We're going to walk through each one stock by stock.
So, let's start at the very beginning with Layer 1. We're talking about the computational horsepower that is the absolute bedrock of all artificial intelligence, the brains of the operation.
All right, so for our first pick, we're starting with the controversial one. The position isn't in the undisputed market leader, Nvidia. Nope. It's in its most important, and I'd argue, its most necessary competitor, AMD.
And this is a really high conviction bet for me. You can see it right here. A pretty significant position, valued at over 17,500 pounds, is staked on this exact thesis.
Okay, so here's the most crucial point. The bet is not that AMD's chips are better than Nvidia's. The bet is that customers like Mark Zuckerberg at Meta and Satya Nadella at Microsoft are absolutely terrified of a world where Nvidia has a total monopoly. For supply chain security, for pricing leverage, they have to have a second source. It's not a choice.
And this chart just gets right to the heart of the opportunity. Look, AMD doesn't need to win. It just needs to compete. It's like the smartphone world, right? Apple dominates, but Samsung still makes billions of dollars. If AMD can just capture, say, 10 to 15% of this colossal market for AI chips, the value of this position could grow substantially.
Okay, so you've got the chips. Great. But how do all the startups and developers actually get their hands on that crazy expensive computing power? Well, that brings us right to the second layer of our shovel strategy, the cloud.
And this company, Nebius Group, this is the rocket fuel for the portfolio. What they do is brilliant. They buy thousands of these super expensive GPUs, they stick them in a data center, and then they rent them out by the hour. They are creating the GPU cloud.
This 10,700-pound position has had an absolutely incredible run this year. It was up nearly 400% at one point. Why? Precisely because the demand to just rent GPU power is completely exploding. Now, this slide really highlights the central tension of this investment. On one hand, you have a massive, multi-billion-dollar deal with Meta that completely validates their technology. But on the other hand, building these data centers burns through an insane amount of cash, and that means they might have to issue more shares, which would dilute existing owners like me.
So you've got the brains and the chips, and you've got access through the cloud, but where do you physically put all of this hardware? I mean, you can't just plug an AI supercomputer into a regular wall socket. This stuff requires industrial-scale power. And that brings us to the final layer of our infrastructure stack, applied digital. And you got to understand, this is fundamentally a real estate play that's just disguised as a technology investment.
An 8,200-pound investment is allocated right here to solve one of the single biggest bottlenecks in the entire AI build-out, a massive shortage of power-ready land.
Their competitive advantage, their moat, it isn't some complex software. It's owning huge plots of land that already have pre-approved industrial-scale power contracts in place. Right now, the wait time for a new grid connection can be up to 5 years. So hyperscalers like Amazon and Microsoft are desperate for this kind of land, and that gives Applied Digital enormous pricing power. Okay, so investing in these three companies, it offers just massive potential. But let's be honest, they're also high growth and super volatile. So how do you manage that risk without letting your emotions take over? The key isn't just about the stocks you pick, it's about the system you use to manage them.
This system means you have to actively try to poke holes in your own best arguments. For example, with Nebius, I used a rigorous process to find the single biggest risk, ignoring all the hype. And you know what? The main risk wasn't competition, it was dilution, the danger that the company would issue new shares to fund its growth, making each of my shares less valuable. Understanding that key risk allows for calm, logical decisions, not emotional ones.
So, at the end of the day, this entire strategy really comes down to answering this one fundamental question. As you approach the biggest technological shift of our generation, are you going to be one of the thousands of miners out there digging for gold, or are you going to be the one selling them the shovels?